She stood alone on the ridge, the kind of place where silence had weight, where even the air seemed to hesitate. The valley stretched endless before her, heat rippling above the sand like waves on a broken sea. Through her scope, Meredith Caldwell, though the world once knew her as Mercury, locked eyes with a man who didn't know he was already living his last breath. Why did they always look the same? She wondered. The men marked as high-value targets. Nervous hands, eyes darting left to right, pretending control when fear already hollowed them out. He shifted, wiping sweat from his brow, unaware that 2 miles away a woman was adjusting for wind and distance with the precision of a machine, but the heart of someone who carried ghosts in every calculation. The crosshairs steadied. Her shoulder throbbed where a bullet had grazed her hours earlier, pain compartmentalized, irrelevant. The desert was a cruel teacher, teaching patience, stillness, silence. A storm gathered in the distance, winds cutting across her line of sight, sand scattering like fractured glass. Most snipers would pack up, wait for better conditions. But she wasn't most. She wasn't even supposed to exist anymore. Her voice broke the quiet, low and steady in her throat mic. Target moving to position Alpha. Wind 12, variable, 40 seconds. Colonel Wells answered in her ear, his tone clipped, urgent. Conditions are closing fast, Mercury. You've got one window. She didn't reply. There was no need. Words distracted. She calculated. Temperature, barometric pressure, wind drift, rotation of the Earth, thousands of variables that would overwhelm a machine, but to her they fit together like pieces of a puzzle she had solved 100 times before. Her breathing slowed, one heartbeat, then another. She pressed the trigger with the exact pressure required, 4.2 pounds, no more, no less. The shot cracked across the valley. For 2.8 seconds the bullet owned the desert. Then the man collapsed, a single wound center mass, no scream, no second chance. Target down, she whispered. Wells exhaled on the other end, reverent. My God, Mercury, 30 years of service, and I've never seen a shot like that. But her face gave nothing away. Her hands moved with practiced precision, breaking down the rifle piece by piece. The mission was done. The world would call it flawless, but Meredith Caldwell Mercury knew the truth. It was her last act, her last sanctioned pull of the trigger. What no one knew was that history would remember that shot, but not for the reasons anyone expected. 13 years later, the desert was gone, replaced by manicured grass and the faint echo of rifles cracking on a range thousands of miles from war. At Fort Liberty, the international sniper competition looked more like an Olympic event than a battlefield. Flags from 24 nations fluttered in the Carolina air. Cameras lined the course. Commentators spoke in polished tones about elite precision and record-breaking expectations. In the center of it all stood Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Stone, a man sculpted for attention. His jaw square, his uniform immaculate, his smile perfectly calibrated for headlines. Team Phantom isn't here to just compete, he told the reporters. We're here to shatter records. His words rippled across the crowd. Everyone knew what record he meant. 3,540 meters, the longest confirmed sniper kill in history. Officially, that was the mark. Unofficially, well, no one spoke about the nameless shot in the Afghan mountains, the one taken by someone who supposedly never existed. Stone promised to go further, 4,000 meters, the impossible shot, the kind of claim that made generals frown and journalists salivate. From the back of the stands, Meredith watched, not as Mercury, not even as a soldier, just as Professor Caldwell, quiet, almost invisible in her consultant's badge and modest blouse. At 38, she looked more academic than operative. Auburn hair cut practically to her shoulders, glasses perched lightly when she graded papers. To most, she was nothing but another teacher. But to Stone, and to the men watching her too closely, she was something else, something he couldn't quite place yet. He glanced at her across the field, eyes narrowing with the sharp instinct of a predator recognizing movement in the brush. He dismissed her quickly. An academic, irrelevant, but the seed had been planted. Back in her office, the illusion was more convincing. Stacks of textbooks, whiteboards filled with equations, students lining her door for help with calculations. She carried herself with calm authority, teaching cadets how projectiles arc, how wind steals bullets, how math can predict chaos. Professor Caldwell, a nervous freshman, knocked, clutching a notebook. "I'm still struggling with the trajectory models from yesterday. I don't get how a bullet can fall that fast." She smiled, softening. "It begins dropping the moment it leaves the barrel. Gravity doesn't wait for you. The art is knowing how far and how fast." Her hand traced arcs on paper with the ease of memory. Every line she drew wasn't just math. It was ghosts, nights in the desert, seconds when lives hung on equations. "You mean like engineering?" he asked. Something in her eyes flickered, something like that. He never noticed the black SUV outside her window, government plates, men watching, waiting. That night when gunfire echoed from the training range, every instinct in her body snapped awake. She dropped behind her desk, heart slowing instead of racing, hand reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. 3 seconds. That's all it took for her mind to remind her she was Mercury anymore, just a professor, just safe. But the conditioning never died. Her phone vibrated. The screen showed only a single letter, J. She answered, her voice steady. "This is a surprise." "Shouldn't be," came the reply, rougher, older, but unmistakable. "Colonel Jackson Wells. He's back, Mercury. Stone's boasting he'll hit 4,000 meters before the week is out. And that record of yours, the one that doesn't exist, it's about to fall." She froze. "My record doesn't exist, Jack. Neither does Mercury." Silence. Then his words, low and certain. "Tell that to Axiom Defense. They're not here for the trophy. They're here for the algorithm, the Kiev algorithm. It's resurfaced." Her hand nearly slipped. The words felt like a bullet to the chest. She had destroyed everything, burned, buried, erased. How could it be back? Wells's voice was final. "Meet me, 1 hour, usual place." When the line cut, she stood in the stillness of her office, then opened a drawer. Beneath a false bottom lay a small leather case. Inside, not papers, not books. A faded commendation inscribed with the words, "Operation Kiev 2008. Beside it, a medal few civilians would recognize. The intelligence star, valor in silence. Her hand touched it gently. 17 years, she whispered, not long enough to outrun the past. The cafe near the base smelled of burnt coffee and cheap pastries, but it was neutral ground. Wells arrived as punctual as ever, his step slower now, his knee stiff. Age had bent him but not broken him. He sat across from her without ceremony. "You look well, Mercury." "Don't call me that," she said sharply. "That name died in Afghanistan." His eyes narrowed, but he slid a tablet across the table. On it, the surveillance photos. Marcus Stone shaking hands with men in suits, men who didn't belong to the military. "Axiom Defense," Wells said. "They're building targeting systems, using Stone as their proof of concept. They think they can recreate the algorithm." She shook her head. "Impossible, I destroyed it." "Not everything," Wells replied. "You kept part of it up here." He tapped his temple. "And if Stone hits 4,000 meters, they'll come for you." She stared at him, pulse steady but her blood running cold. He wasn't wrong. She was the algorithm, not the files, not the fragments, her. And then he slid a final photo across the table, a team shot from Kiev. Faces blurred except two, hers, and the young man who had saved her life, Michael Chen. On the back, Wells had written in his crooked hand, "His daughter is at Fort Liberty, training. She doesn't know what happened. She doesn't know what you carry." Caldwell's hand trembled before she curled it into a fist. The ghosts weren't done with her yet. Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The hall buzzed with tension, every chair filled with men who had fought wars across continents. Teams from 24 nations sat rigid, their uniforms pressed, their weapons polished to the sheen of trophies. Generals spoke in formal tones about distances, courses, and pushing the boundaries of precision warfare. Cameras flashed. Journalists scribbled. And yet Meredith Caldwell sat among them, unnoticed. Just a professor, her badge read. Consultant. Civilian. She was background noise to the spectacle of soldiers who believed they carried the weight of history. But history, she knew, had a cruel sense of irony. It often hid itself in silence, in faces no one bothered to study. She took notes quietly as Brigadier General Raburn outlined the rules. Teams would engage targets from 800 to 1,500 meters today. Tomorrow, moving silhouettes under combat stress. The final rounds would test limits once thought impossible. He paused, his gaze scanning the room like a judge searching for guilt. "You are the best of the best," he said gravely. "But remember this, you are also examples. The world is watching. Nations are watching. Do not disgrace your flags." The applause was muted, respectful. Cameras panned to the stars of the moment, Colonel Marcus Stone and his phantom team. They sat in the front, glowing under attention, polished like statues in a temple. Stone's jaw tightened under the weight of expectation, but his eyes wandered back. Found her. Lingered a moment too long. Meredith lowered her gaze. Let him wonder. Suspicion was safer than certainty. Later in her office, the world felt smaller. The whiteboard still held half-finished equations. Coffee cooled in a forgotten mug. Her fingers traced chalk lines on the board without thought. Wind drag, Coriolis effect. Equations she once calculated in her head while bullets cracked inches from her skull. A knock broke the silence. She turned and froze. The young woman on her doorstep looked like a ghost. Dark hair tied back in military precision. Uniform pressed. Eyes sharp, watchful. The resemblance hit her like a blow. Michael Chen's eyes. "Professor Caldwell." Meredith's voice caught in her throat. "Yes. My name is Lieutenant Rebecca Chen, 5th Special Forces. I need to speak with you. About my father." For a moment the room tilted. Memories of Ukraine, muddy fields, a man bleeding out but smiling through pain. "Tell the little dragon I did something that mattered." Meredith forced calm. "How did you find me?" Rebecca held up a photograph, worn, edges frayed. A team picture, the faces blurred but on the back names. One of them Mercury. "My father carried this," Rebecca said softly. "He wrote letters, he mentioned a mathematician, said she helped them do the impossible." Her eyes locked with Meredith. "That's you, isn't it?" The air thickened. Meredith's instincts screamed trap. Could be Axiom's play, could be Wells testing her. Or it could be real. A daughter searching for the truth buried in classified reports. "You should leave," Meredith said at last, her voice low. "For your own safety." Rebecca didn't move. "I'm not afraid." "You should be." The words hung between them, heavy as stone. Then Meredith's security system buzzed, motion sensors triggered at the perimeter of her property. A camera feed blinked on the corner of her laptop. 2 SUVs, 6 men, moving with military precision, not government, contractors. Her pulse slowed, shifting into the old rhythm. Fight, survive, calculate. "In the pantry," she snapped, grabbing a Glock from her drawer. "There's a tunnel, storm shelter 50 yards, go now." Rebecca hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll create a diversion." Rebecca's jaw tightened. Military training fought with fear. At last she nodded. "Where do I meet you?" Meredith scribbled coordinates. "Wilson State Forest, Fire Tower, 2 hours. If I'm not there, assume I'm compromised." Rebecca's eyes shone with something more than fear, something like resolve. She saluted, sharp and fast, then vanished into the tunnel. Meredith was alone. Through her reinforced window she counted silhouettes moving in formation. Contractors, Axiom maybe, or another predator hunting the same prey. Their mistake was thinking they had time. She assembled her rifle in silence, the motion's muscle memory. One shot into the engine block of the first SUV, steam erupted, metal groaned. Another round, second vehicle disabled. Their transportation gone in under 6 seconds. "Let's see how you walk home," she whispered. Gunfire answered, splintering wood, shattering glass. They weren't here to capture, they were here to erase. She retreated to the pantry, sealed the hatch behind her, and slipped into the tunnel. Darkness swallowed her as gunfire roared above. By the time the contractors breached the cabin, she was gone. The forest embraced her like an old ally, silent, watchful, every step measured, every sound catalogued. She moved as Mercury once had, invisible, untouchable. And with each step, the truth pressed heavier. Someone wanted the algorithm. Someone was willing to kill for it. Wells had warned her, but if he hadn't sent those men, who had? The board was larger than she thought. More players, more shadows. The fire tower rose like a skeleton against the night sky, its frame sharp against the stars. She approached with predator caution, circling twice, scanning for traps, for glint of optics, for the wrong kind of silence. Clear. She climbed. At the top, Rebecca Chen waited back against the wall, hand near her weapon, tense, ready. "You made it," Rebecca whispered. "So did you." Meredith studied her, every line of her posture. Michael's determination lived in her bones. Still, verification was needed. "Tell me something only his daughter would know." Rebecca didn't flinch. "He called me Little Dragon in every letter." The words cut straight through her defenses. Meredith's breath hitched. Michael's voice came back, faint, broken, but certain. "Tell the little dragon." It was real. Meredith turned toward the forest, eyes scanning. "You're in danger, Lieutenant, more than you realize. Someone else is hunting the Kiev algorithm. Not just Axiom, not Stone. A third hand in this game." "Russian?" Rebecca asked. Maybe worse. Whoever gets it first controls the future of warfare." Rebecca frowned. "My father's letters, they said the algorithm could change everything, but he never explained how." Meredith's jaw tightened. Trust was a luxury, but the truth was a necessity. "It predicts the impossible," she said finally. "Every variable, every shift in the environment, it makes luck obsolete. Imagine a bullet fired from 2.5 miles. It should be chaos. But with the algorithm, it becomes certainty. That's why they'll kill for it." Rebecca's voice hardened. "Then they'll have to go through both of us." Meredith turned to study her, surprised by the steel in her tone. Young, fierce, reckless, like Michael once had been. She didn't smile, but she felt something stir. Hope. Morning dawned red, light spilling across Fort Liberty's ranges. The second day of competition began. Soldiers lined up, weapons gleaming, cameras clicked. Meredith stood on the observation deck, consultant's badge swaying in the breeze. To everyone she was background. To Stone she was a question that gnawed. As Phantom prepared for their round, he glanced at her, eyes sharp, challenging, calculating. His spotter called the wind. His shots rang out. Targets fell one after another, flawless. The crowd murmured in awe. Then Stone looked up, straight at her. Not a smile, not even suspicion. Recognition. And Meredith Caldwell knew. The ghosts of Kiev weren't buried anymore. They were standing on the firing line. Why was Stone watching her instead of his targets? From the official's platform, Meredith could feel his gaze like the weight of a trigger pull. His rifle rested across his lap, his spotter whispering corrections, but Stone's eyes, sharp, predatory, drifted back to her, as if she were the real contest. When his next shot cracked through the air and struck center mass at 1,200 meters, the crowd erupted. Applause rippled through the stands. Judges scribbled notes. Military cameras zoomed in on the star of the event. But Stone didn't celebrate. He didn't nod. He didn't bask in the moment. He just studied her face, reading it the way a sniper reads wind, invisible but decisive. Meredith lowered her gaze, pen scratching across scoring sheets. A small, practiced smile, academic, detached, harmless, but inside her pulse quickened. He was too good, too intuitive. He smelled the truth like cordite after a shot. And if Stone suspected, then Axiom wasn't far behind. She left before the round ended, walking calmly, consultant badge swinging. Too fast would draw attention. Too slow would invite a tale. "Professor Caldwell," a voice called from behind. She turned, polite, neutral. Marcus Stone stood there, rifle case slung over one shoulder. Up close, he was taller than she'd expected. Sharper too. The kind of man who lived on adrenaline and calculation. "Impressive shooting today," she offered. He smiled faintly. "Thank you, though between us, hitting moving targets at 1,200 meters isn't history. Not yet." His gaze lingered. "I hear you've written papers, long-range ballistics, theoretical work on shots beyond 3 kilometers. Meredith kept her voice even, purely academic, numbers on a page. Stone tilted his head. "And yet you're here, consulting for a live-fire competition. Funny coincidence, don't you think?" "Not really," she said calmly. "Equations apply to bullets the same way they apply to satellites. I make sure the math adds up." Stone's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Tell me something, Professor. Do you think it's possible to hit a target at 4,000 meters?" The trap was obvious. Deny it, and she dismissed her own research. Confirm it, and she acknowledged knowledge no professor should have. She paused just long enough to suggest honesty. "Theoretically, yes. Practically, it would require extraordinary skill." Stone's eyes flickered. "Most snipers aren't mathematicians." "Most mathematicians aren't snipers." The silence stretched. Then one of his men called from across the range. Stone adjusted his rifle case. "We should continue this conversation later, Professor. I'd be very interested in your perspective." He walked away, his shadow long across the field. Meredith exhaled slowly. He wasn't convinced, but he wasn't dismissing her either. He was circling, testing, the same way predators circled prey before striking. That night her cabin smoldered in ruins behind her. The attack still lingered in the smell of burned wood and shattered glass. She hadn't returned, couldn't risk it. Instead, she sat in a small faculty apartment on campus, the walls too thin, the locks too fragile. But anonymity offered its own protection. Rebecca Chen paced the room, her uniform jacket tossed over a chair. "You should have told me," she said sharply. "Told you what?" Meredith asked, eyes scanning her laptop, encrypted files flashing across the screen. "That you're Mercury." The word hit the air like a gunshot. Meredith didn't look up, and if I were. Rebecca stopped packing, her jaw tight. "Then my father died protecting you, protecting what you carried out of Kiev." Meredith's hand stilled on the keyboard. For a moment the facade slipped. She saw Michael again, his bloodied hands pushing her toward the extraction point, his smile faint but resolute. "Tell the little dragon." She closed her eyes. "Your father died protecting the algorithm, protecting the chance that it wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. He made the only choice he could." Rebecca's voice cracked, but she steadied it. "Then tell me the truth. What was Kiev?" Meredith looked at her. Long, hard. The young woman's eyes were his, stubborn, relentless. She deserved at least a sliver of truth. "Kiev was more than an operation," Meredith said finally. "It was a turning point. We proved the impossible shot wasn't luck. We proved math could turn chance into certainty. And then everything went wrong." Rebecca swallowed. "And my father?" Meredith's voice softened. "He was the best spotter I ever worked with. He saw things no one else could. He saved lives. He saved me. And his last words were about you." Rebecca blinked fast, holding back tears. "What did he say?" Meredith's throat tightened. "He said, 'Tell the little dragon I did something that mattered.'" For the first time, Rebecca's composure cracked. She turned away, hand covering her face. Her shoulders trembled once. Then discipline returned, sharp as steel. "Then I'm finishing what he started," she whispered. The next morning, the competition grounds buzzed with more than military precision. Whispers spread about Stone, about the record, about a rumored exhibition challenge. It started small. A cadet asked Stone about his confidence in hitting 4,000 meters. Stone laughed, confident. "We don't try, kid, we do." But then the cadet turned to Meredith. "Professor, do you think math can outshoot experience?" She hesitated, every eye turned. Stone smirked, waiting. "Mathematics," she said slowly, "doesn't care about rank or medals. Equations don't flinch under pressure. If applied correctly, math doesn't miss." The silence was electric. Stone's smile hardened. "Then perhaps we should test that theory after the finals, a little exhibition." "An exhibition?" The general overseeing the event asked, intrigued. Stone nodded. "My experience against her calculations, at 4,000 meters." The crowd murmured, cameras turning. A civilian professor against the military's finest sniper. Impossible, ridiculous, entertaining. Meredith's gaze never left Stone's. Agreed. The general smiled thinly. "Excellent publicity, science versus skill, let's make it official." The deal was struck. Stone leaned in as they shook hands. His whisper was meant only for her. "When you fail, everyone will know who you really are." Meredith's voice was calm, cold, "Or they'll know math was never your strongest subject." Their eyes locked. Neither blinked. The war had begun, and it wasn't just on the range. That evening, Rebecca cornered her in the shadows of a storage room, her voice urgent. "What are you doing? Exposing yourself like this? If Stone suspects—" "He already does," Meredith cut in. "This isn't about hiding anymore. It's about controlling the narrative." Rebecca frowned. "Narrative?" "Stone thinks he's forcing my hand, making me choose between failing publicly or revealing Mercury, but he's wrong." Meredith's eyes glinted in the dim light. "Because I won't be shooting like Mercury. I'll be shooting like your father taught me, like a ghost." Rebecca's breath caught. "Then what's the plan?" Meredith leaned closer, voice low, sharp as a blade. "We don't outshoot them, Lieutenant. We outthink them. Stone believes this is about skill. Axiom believes this is about technology. They're both wrong. This is about control, and control belongs to the one who understands the game." The room fell silent. Only the hum of the lights remained. Rebecca nodded slowly, resolve settling into her bones. "Then let's make sure they never see the shot coming." At the officers' club that night, Stone nursed a bourbon, his tablet glowing with classified files. He scrolled past heavily redacted reports, one name leaping out between black bars: Asset Mercury. Confirmed kill, 3,540 meters. Kiev, 2008. He frowned. He didn't believe in coincidences. A professor with papers mirroring classified algorithms. A cabin wired with military-grade traps. A challenge she didn't hesitate to accept. He set his glass down, the sound sharp against the table. Across the room, Colonel Wells entered with Richard Keller of Axiom. They sat in the corner, voices low but urgent. Stone watched them, suspicion hardening. Wells knew more than he said. Keller was playing both sides. And Caldwell. Stone's lips tightened. She wasn't who she claimed to be. He didn't know yet if she was Mercury. But he would find out. Why did Wells look like he'd aged 10 years overnight? Meredith found him at the perimeter of the range, away from the crowds and cameras, his posture stiff against the morning sun. His uniform carried its weight like an old scar, ribbons gleaming but dulled by time. He didn't greet her with warmth, not anymore. Just a nod, clipped, as if every second mattered. "You shouldn't have agreed," he said without preamble. Meredith kept her tone flat. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," Wells snapped, his voice sharp enough to draw looks from nearby soldiers. He lowered it quickly. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "I kept him close," she said. "Closer is safer than guessing what he suspects." Wells shook his head. "You've lit a fuse, Mercury. Stone's not just a sniper chasing glory. He's their front man. The exhibition isn't about bragging rights. It's bait." Her chest tightened. Bait for what? Wells hesitated. His eyes darted around as if the very air could betray them. "Project Prometheus," he whispered. The words dropped between them like ordnance. Meredith's jaw clenched. She thought she'd buried that phrase forever. Prometheus, the black file, the nightmare project. It wasn't just the Kiev algorithm. It was its weaponization, its integration into autonomous systems, drones that never missed, artillery that bent physics, a future where wars weren't fought by humans anymore but by equations. And she had been the one to write the first lines of code. "You told me it was dead," she said, voice trembling despite her control. "It was," Wells said, "until Axiom bought the scraps. Now they're rebuilding. And Stone's challenge, it's their demonstration. Prove a human can replicate what the algorithm predicts. Then they market the machine as the next evolution." Meredith's stomach sank. The 4,000-meter shot wasn't about pride. It was proof. If Stone hit it, Axiom would claim the algorithm as theirs. If she hit it, they'd expose her as Mercury and take her instead. Either way, Prometheus would rise. She whispered the truth that haunted her. "There's no winning this." Wells looked at her with the same grim acceptance she remembered from the desert. "Not by playing their game." Back in her faculty quarters, Meredith found Rebecca waiting, perched on the edge of her desk like a soldier before deployment. The younger woman's eyes carried restless fire, impatience simmering beneath discipline. "What did Wells say?" Rebecca demanded. Meredith shut the door before answering. "It's bigger than Stone. Axiom's using him to sell Project Prometheus." Rebecca frowned. "Prometheus?" Meredith explained, voice low, steady. "The algorithm. The machines. The nightmare future where men and women like Rebecca, like her father, became obsolete, replaced by code that never questioned orders, never hesitated, never felt the weight of a trigger pull." Rebecca's face hardened with every word. "So if Stone hits the shot, they prove humans are obsolete. And if you hit it, they prove you're the algorithm." "Exactly." Rebecca folded her arms. "Then what's the third option?" Meredith studied her. Young, yes, but sharp. Michael's daughter in every line of her face. "The third option," she said slowly, "is to change the rules of the game." "How?" Meredith didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened a drawer and pulled out a small case. Inside, wrapped in cloth, lay an old spotting scope, scratched, weathered, carried across deserts and mountains. She set it gently on the table. "This was your father," she said. Rebecca's breath caught. She reached out, hands trembling, and touched the metal. For a moment, the soldier fell away. She was just a daughter holding a piece of a man she'd lost too young. Meredith's voice softened. "He didn't believe in algorithms. He believed in people, in trust. That's why he was my spotter. That's why I lived." Rebecca looked up, tears brimming but unshed. "Then let me spot for you." Meredith froze. "No." "Yes," Rebecca pressed. "If this is a trap, you'll need someone you can trust, someone who knows what's at stake, someone who believes in you like he did." The room fell silent. Meredith's heart ached with memory, with fear, with the knowledge that dragging Rebecca into the fire might doom her the same way it had doomed Michael. But then she saw it, the same determination in Rebecca's eyes, not recklessness, resolve. She exhaled. "All right, but if you come with me, you follow every order, every correction, no hesitation." Rebecca straightened, snapping to attention. "Yes, ma'am." For the first time, Meredith almost smiled. Almost. The third day of the competition arrived. The course tested speed under stress, a rapid target acquisition at 1,000 meters, moving silhouettes at 800, shifting winds at 1,200. Teams moved like machines, crisp, precise, flawless. Stone's phantoms dominated again, as expected. Cameras captured every kill shot, reporters calling it a masterclass. The man looked untouchable. But beneath the spectacle, Meredith noticed cracks. His shots were perfect, almost too perfect. Not the organic rhythm of a sniper reading the wind, but the mechanical consistency of something rehearsed. She leaned toward Rebecca, whispering, "He's running an assist." Rebecca frowned. "What kind?" "Augmented optics, feeding him corrections in real time. They're testing the interface before the exhibition." Rebecca's jaw tightened. "Cheating." Meredith shook her head. "Not cheating, marketing." Stone didn't need to be the best. He needed to look like the best. Enough for investors, enough for generals who didn't know the difference. And if she exposed him, if she revealed the assist, Axiom would burn her alive. That evening, Wells met her again, this time in the shadow of the bleachers, the distant sound of rifles echoing in the night air. "You're running out of time," he said. Meredith's reply was sharp. "So are you. Why didn't you stop this?" Wells's eyes were heavy, regret thick in them. "Because I can't. Axiom's too deep, too many contracts, too many hands in their pockets. The only way to kill Prometheus is to kill its myth, discredit it, publicly." Meredith shook her head. "That's what Stone's exhibition is, a public coronation." "Not if you beat him." She laughed bitterly. "And expose myself." Wells leaned closer, voice a low growl. "Mercury's already exposed. You think they do know? They're circling, waiting for you to prove it. But here's the truth, you can't run from it anymore. The only way out is through." Meredith's breath caught. His words weren't just strategy. They were condemnation. She had created Prometheus. She had buried Mercury, but both were alive, clawing at the surface. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why not let it burn without me?" Wells's reply was almost gentle. "Because dignity doesn't run, it fights, even when no one knows its name." Her throat tightened. For a moment she wanted to argue, to say she had earned her silence, her escape, but deep down she knew Wells was right. When she returned to her quarters, Rebecca was waiting, scope in hand. "We've got one day," she said firmly. "So we train." Meredith almost laughed. "You don't train for 4,000 meters. You calculate, you predict, you pray." Rebecca's eyes sharpened. "Then let me carry the math. You focus on the shot." Meredith studied her. A soldier, a daughter, a reflection of Michael's loyalty. And for the first time she didn't see a liability, she saw a partner. She nodded. "All right, but if we do this, we don't aim to win. We aim to end it." Rebecca tilted her head. "End it how?" Meredith's lips tightened into something that wasn't quite a smile. "By proving that certainty doesn't belong to machines. It belongs to people willing to risk everything." The young woman's eyes glinted. "Then let's risk it." The stadium filled the next day, a sea of uniforms, cameras, and restless anticipation. The exhibition had been announced publicly now. Colonel Marcus Stone versus Professor Meredith Caldwell, 4,000 meters, one shot each. Spectacle theater history. The general stepped forward, voice booming across the loudspeakers. "Today, we witness the limits of human skill. Two paths, soldier and scholar, converging on the impossible." The crowd roared. Stone took his position first, flanked by his spotter and Axiom representatives, their suits gleaming in the Carolina sun. His rifle was sleek, custom-built, optics glowing faintly with tech no one would name aloud. He looked confident, untouchable. Meredith walked to her station with Rebecca at her side. Her rifle was older, simpler. No digital overlays, no hidden feeds, just glass, steel, and faith. The contrast was obvious. Cameras panned, commentators buzzing. The underdog narrative wrote itself. Rebecca leaned close, whispering so only Meredith could hear. "You ready?" Meredith settled behind the rifle, her cheek against the worn stock, the scope filling her vision with endless distance. She exhaled slowly, steadying her heart. "No," she whispered back, "but that never stopped me before." The crowd hushed, the targets were raised. The impossible shot waited. And somewhere in the silence, ghosts gathered to watch. Why did the world feel so quiet just before a trigger pull? The crowd pressed in from every direction, but to Meredith there was only silence. Not the silence of peace, the silence of tension, like the universe itself was holding its breath. 1,000 cameras clicked, commentators filled the air with polished words, but inside the scope there was only distance. A valley stretching 4 kilometers, a target barely visible, swaying in the faintest wind. Beside her, Rebecca steadied the spotting scope. Her voice came low, controlled. "Wind 6 knots left to right. Light cross breeze at 1200. Mirage indicates shift at 2200. Meredith's fingers brushed the trigger guard. Her heartbeat slowed. Numbers unfolded in her mind like an old, familiar prayer. Drop rate, spin drift, Coriolis effect, humidity shift. Calculations she had once carried in blood and bone, not numbers on a board. But this wasn't Afghanistan. This wasn't survival. This was spectacle, and the trap was closing. The announcer's voice boomed over loudspeakers. "Colonel Marcus Stone will fire first." The crowd erupted. Stone rose with the grace of a man used to attention. His rifle gleamed, custom-engineered, optics whispering with subtle glow. Axiom's fingerprints were everywhere. He settled in, his spotter murmuring inputs he didn't need to calculate. The computer did it for him. Stone exhaled, squeezed. The rifle cracked like thunder. 2 full seconds of flight. The target jerked, dead center. The stadium roared. Soldiers pounded the bleachers. Reporters shouted into microphones. The record, impossible for a generation, had just been tied. Stone rose slowly, calm, almost bored. He looked across the range, across the crowd, straight into Meredith's eyes. His smile wasn't celebration. It was ownership. "Your turn," he mouthed. Rebecca leaned close, her voice tight. "He's using a feed, it's too perfect." "I know. So what now?" Meredith steadied her breath. "Now we remind them what human looks like." She lowered herself into position, the stock pressing into her shoulder. The rifle wasn't sleek, wasn't glowing with hidden circuits. It was steel, honest, demanding. Through the scope, the world narrowed to a shimmering line of heat and distance. Rebecca's voice threaded in, calm, precise. "Wind holding at 6, adjust 0.3 mil left. Elevation 26.4, mirage steady at 2000, you're clean." Meredith felt the math settle into her bones, into her breath. She didn't see numbers, she felt them. The way Michael Chen had taught her, the way Rebecca now mirrored him. But doubt crept in. 4,000 meters, too far, too unstable. Even Mercury had never tested these edges in public, and if she missed, the commentators would tear her apart. Stone would claim victory, Axiom would own the myth, and Prometheus would live. Her throat tightened. Sweat rolled down her spine. She wanted to close her eyes, to run, to surrender the burden she'd carried too long. Rebecca's hand touched her arm, steady, grounding. "My father trusted you, so do I." The words cut through the doubt. Meredith inhaled once, slow. Then let it out. The trigger broke. The rifle thundered. The bullet soared into silence. The crowd leaned forward, breaths caught. 2 full seconds of nothing. 3, 4. The target jerked violently, spinning backward, its plate ringing across the valley. Impact. Direct hit. The stadium froze. For one heartbeat there was no sound, no movement. Then the explosion of noise hit like a wave. Soldiers leapt to their feet, cadets screamed, cameras flashed so bright the air turned white. A 4,000-meter hit. Live, verified, undeniable. History. Meredith stayed prone, her cheek still against the rifle, her breathing slow, her hands steady. Rebecca's whisper broke the storm. "You did it." "No," Meredith murmured, "we did." But the celebration was poisoned. Because across the range, Marcus Stone wasn't clapping. He wasn't celebrating. He was staring at her with something darker than defeat: recognition. "Mercury." The general strode forward, booming into microphones. "History has been made today. The longest confirmed exhibition shot in competition history, 4,000 meters, by Professor Meredith Caldwell." The crowd erupted again, but Meredith didn't move. Applause felt like a noose tightening around her throat. Every cheer was another spotlight, every camera another confirmation. Rebecca leaned close. "We need to go." Meredith stood slowly, rifle slung. Faces swarmed her, hands reaching for congratulations, cameras flashing like muzzle bursts. She smiled faintly, politely, even as dread churned her stomach. Then Stone's voice cut through the noise. "Professor Caldwell." The crowd hushed, expectant. Stone stepped forward, his tone theatrical but his eyes cold. An extraordinary shot, perhaps too extraordinary, for someone who claims to be only a professor. Murmurs rippled, cameras turned. Meredith kept her face calm. "Math doesn't miss, Colonel, you said so yourself." Stone's smile was razor thin. "Maybe, or maybe you're not who you claim to be." The crowd gasped softly. The general intervened, chuckling. Now, let's not turn a triumph into a trial. Professor Caldwell has proven herself today. That is enough." But the seed had been planted. Stone knew. And worse, so did Axiom. That night, Meredith and Rebecca retreated to the forest, far from the noise. The fire tower loomed again, their temporary sanctuary. The wind howled around its frame, carrying the faint echo of distant gunfire from cadet training fields. Rebecca paced, restless. "He's going to expose you, you saw his face." Meredith sat quietly, cleaning the rifle with calm hands. "Then he'll try, and when he does, the only proof he'll have is a shot." Rebecca stopped packing. "But if Axiom believes you're Mercury, they won't just expose you, they'll take you." "I know." Rebecca clenched her fists. "Then let me protect you, let me." Meredith's voice cut sharp. "This isn't about protecting me, it's about stopping Prometheus. If I disappear, you have to carry what your father started, you understand?" Rebecca's jaw set. "Then teach me everything, now, before it's too late." Meredith studied her, the soldier's fire, the daughter's loyalty, the same hunger Michael once carried. And for the first time, she allowed herself to hope the legacy might outlive her. But hope was fragile. Because down in the valley, at a hidden command post, Marcus Stone met with Axiom's Richard Keller. Keller's suit was immaculate, his smile predatory. She hid it, without assistance, without tech. That makes her more valuable than the system itself. Stone's jaw clenched. "She's Mercury." Keller nodded. "Then we bring her in, quietly, before anyone else claims her." Stone's voice was low, conflicted. "And if she won't come?" Keller's smile widened. "Then she won't have a choice." Stone said nothing. His fingers tapped the table. A soldier torn between ego, loyalty, and the shadow of something he didn't yet understand. Because for the first time in his career, Marcus Stone had been outshot. And it wasn't just his pride at stake. It was the future of war. Back in the tower, Meredith lay awake, staring at the stars. Rebecca slept nearby, her breathing steady. The wind whistled through the beams, carrying ghosts of memory. Michael's face, Wells's warning, the target falling at 4,000 meters. And the truth she couldn't escape. She had won the exhibition, but in doing so, she had stepped into the light. Mercury was alive again. And every predator in the world would come hunting. Why was the forest so still tonight? Meredith felt it first, that unnatural silence, the kind that didn't belong to nature. No owls, No crickets, no rustle of leaves, just stillness. She shifted, hand brushing the rifle beside her, eyes scanning from the fire tower's window. Moonlight silvered the treetops, but shadows moved where shadows shouldn't. Rebecca stirred, instantly alert, her hand finding her sidearm. "You see it too?" "Yes," Meredith whispered, "they're here." Down below, engines cut quietly, doors eased shut. Too disciplined to be local police. Too quiet to be soldiers on exercise. Contractors. Axiom's hand. Meredith's mind calculated routes, options, outcomes. Too many men, too little cover. The tower was a cage. She turned to Rebecca. "Go now. I'm not leaving you. This isn't a debate." Rebecca's jaw tightened. "You told me I was your spotter. You said we do this together. That hasn't changed." For a heartbeat, Meredith wanted to argue, to force her down the ladder, to order her away. But Michael's face flickered in memory, the same stubborn fire. She exhaled. "Then stay low, and don't miss." They moved as one. Meredith took position with the rifle scope sweeping the tree line. Rebecca slid beside her with the spotting scope, eyes sharp, steady. The first silhouette appeared, crouched, weapon raised. Another behind him, then another, a net closing in. Rebecca whispered, calm under pressure. "Left flank 80 meters, moving fast." Meredith adjusted. The rifle cracked once, a body crumpled. Shouts followed, muffled but urgent. The forest erupted. The firefight was brief but brutal. Precision met numbers. Meredith fired sparingly, every shot chosen, every bullet a sentence. Rebecca called corrections, her voice clipped, unshaken, the ghost of her father in every word. But there were too many. Suppression fire chewed through the wooden frame, splinters flying. Rounds punched holes inches from their heads. "We can't hold this," Rebecca shouted. "I know." Meredith scanned, searching for an opening. Then she saw it, a break in their formation, a gap near the ridge. Risky, narrow, but possible. "On my mark," she said, "we run." Rebecca's breath hitched. "Through them?" "Yes." The younger woman hesitated, then nodded, fierce. Meredith waited, counting shots, tracking patterns. Then silence, reloading. "Now." They sprinted down the tower, boots thundering on steel. Bullets chased them, snapping through the dark. The ridge loomed, sharp, jagged. Meredith shoved Rebecca ahead, her own lungs burning. Shots sparked off stone as they dove behind cover. The forest swallowed them. And then silence again. For now. Hours later, breath ragged, clothes torn, they crouched in a drainage culvert beneath the road. Water dripped. The air smelled of rust and mud. Rebecca's face was pale, her hands shaking slightly as she reloaded. "They knew where we were. How?" Meredith's jaw clenched. "Stone." Rebecca frowned. "You think he—" "He didn't fire the shots, but he opened the door, whether he meant to or not." The weight of betrayal pressed hard. Meredith had seen the way Stone looked at her, the suspicion, the hunger. He wanted her secret, and Axiom wanted her capture. Together, it was a noose she couldn't outrun. Rebecca broke the silence. "What now?" Meredith stared at the muddy water trickling past. She wanted to say run, disappear, vanish into another life, another name. But deep down, she knew that option had died the moment she pulled the trigger at 4,000 meters. "Now we turn the hunt around," she said quietly. Rebecca's eyes widened. "You mean?" "Yes, they want Mercury. Then we remind them what Mercury really is." The younger woman nodded, determination hardening her face. But beneath it, Meredith felt the guilt claw. Dragging Rebecca deeper into this was a betrayal of Michael's last wish. He wanted his daughter safe, protected, away from ghosts. And here she was, training her to be part of them. At dawn, they reached a safe house Wells had arranged years earlier. Remote, unmarked, stocked with supplies that smelled of dust and abandonment. The old colonel was waiting. His face darkened when he saw them, bruised and bloodied. "Damn it, I told you to stay out of sight. They found us, Meredith snapped. No place is safe anymore. Rebecca slammed the door behind her. How did they know where we were? Wells hesitated. You think Stone? Meredith's eyes narrowed. I know Stone. The colonel sighed heavy. Then we accelerate. Prometheus is moving faster than we thought. Keller's pushing for a demonstration, not just sniper assistance. Full integration, autonomous targeting. They want it live before the quarter ends. Meredith's chest tightened. How close? Close enough. Rebecca stepped forward. Then we stop it, expose them, bring it into the light. Wells shook his head. Light doesn't matter. Axiom owns half the contracts already. Exposure won't kill Prometheus. The only way is to discredit it, to prove it fails when it matters most. Meredith understood instantly. The final round. Wells nodded grimly. Exactly. Stone's team is the showcase. If you break them, you break Prometheus, but you'll have to do it publicly, on record. Rebecca looked at Meredith, eyes burning. Then we make sure he misses. Meredith's silence was heavy. Tampering wasn't an option. Cheating would discredit them, not Stone. No, the only path forward was the one she feared most. She'd have to outshoot him again. Not once, not exhibition, but in competition, where failure meant more than shame, it meant Prometheus alive. That night as Rebecca slept, Meredith sat alone, the rifle across her knees. She cleaned it slowly, methodically, every piece sliding back into place. Her reflection stared back in the faint metal, not the professor, not the mathematician. Mercury. She hated the name, hated what it carried, the blood, the ghosts, the silence of men who had died so she could live. But Wells's words echoed. You can't run from it anymore. The only way out is through. And Rebecca's voice cut deeper still. My father trusted you, so do I. Her hands stilled. For years she had lived like a shadow, pretending the world no longer needed her, pretending she could bury what she had built. But the truth was unavoidable. She was Mercury. And Mercury wasn't finished. Meanwhile, across the base, Marcus Stone sat alone in his quarters, staring at the wall. His spotter had gone to bed hours earlier. Axiom's Keller had left with polished promises and veiled threats. But Stone couldn't sleep. Not because of the exhibition, not because of the roar of the crowd. Because of her. The way she had moved, the way she had calculated, the way her shot hadn't been luck or tech or rehearsed precision. It had been alive. He poured a drink, the bourbon burning down his throat. For years he had built himself into a legend, unbreakable, unmatched. And then one woman, a supposed professor, had outshot him at the edge of the possible. He whispered the word he didn't want to believe. Mercury. The name carried weight even he respected. A ghost from stories whispered in dusty ranges and classified files. The sniper no one could confirm, the phantom no one could catch. And if she was real, if she was standing across from him, then what did that make him? The bourbon burned again, his pride twisted like shrapnel. He didn't know yet whose side he was on, his own, Axiom's, or something else entirely. But he knew one thing with certainty. He couldn't let her win again. In the safe house, dawn broke pale across the floorboards. Meredith stood at the window, watching the horizon. Rebecca stirred awake behind her, stretching, yawning softly. Couldn't sleep, Rebecca asked. Didn't try. Rebecca joined her at the window. Tomorrow's the final. After that, it's over, right? Meredith didn't answer, because she knew the truth. For her, it would never be over. She had pulled the trigger at 4,000 meters. She had stepped into the light. And once the world knew Mercury was real, she would never be free again. Why did the air feel heavier on the final morning? The parade ground bustled with soldiers, journalists, and dignitaries, but there was no cheer in the air, no easy laughter. Everyone felt it. The finals weren't just competition anymore. They were something sharper, something dangerous. Meredith moved through the crowd quietly, her civilian badge clipped at her collar, Rebecca close behind. Every step drew eyes. She wasn't anonymous anymore. The woman who had hit 4,000 meters couldn't blend into the background. And every whisper carried the same word. Mercury. Stone stood on the opposite end of the field, flanked by his phantom team. His uniform was immaculate, his posture perfect, but his eyes were restless, dark. He didn't smile at the cameras now. He didn't wave. His focus was fixed on her. Rebecca leaned close, her voice tight. "He's different today." "Yes," Meredith murmured, "because today he's afraid." The finals began with speed rounds. Targets flashing at unpredictable distances, silhouettes sprinting across ranges, steel plates popping and vanishing in seconds. Stone's phantoms moved with ruthless precision. Each shot cracked like thunder, each impact instant. The crowd roared with every kill. Meredith and Rebecca watched from the shadows of the observation tent. She wasn't competing as a team. She wasn't supposed to be part of this at all. But Wells had pulled strings, filed her name as an independent, a professor turned guest participant. The officials had laughed until she'd hit the impossible. Now nobody was laughing. "Ready?" Rebecca asked, handing her the rifle case. Meredith inhaled slowly. "Ready doesn't matter, only steady." They stepped onto the line, cameras flashed, murmurs rippled, the underdog, the ghost, the woman who had no business here. Meredith ignored it all. She lowered herself into position, cheek against stock, the world narrowing through the glass. Rebecca's voice guided her like a heartbeat. 900 meters, wind 2 knots, left edge. The rifle cracked, the plate spun. Another target popped at 750, darting sideways. Rebecca called the lead. Meredith fired, hit. They moved as one, cadence flawless. Spotter and shooter, ghost and legacy. By the end of the round, their score stood equal to Stone. The crowd erupted, and Stone's jaw clenched. The second course broke teams. Urban simulation, targets hidden in windows, alleys, rooftops, time pressure brutal, stress designed to crack precision. Stone's team swept through first, efficient, lethal. They cleared the field in record time. Reporters whispered of inevitability. Then Meredith stepped up. Her rifle felt heavier than ever. The cityscape loomed, painted steel and broken brick. Ghosts whispered in the alleys. Kiev, Afghanistan, streets where every shadow carried death. Rebecca's voice steadied her. Window, 3rd floor, left, half covered. Meredith exhaled, fired, shattered glass, direct hit. Rooftop, right corner, just above the vent. Mirage at 900, adjust point too low. She adjusted, fired, target dropped. They moved through the course like water flowing downhill. Smooth, relentless. By the final plate, their time matched Stone to the second. The crowd was on its feet now. And Stone's stare was a storm. Between rounds, Wells found her in the shadows of the staging tent. His face was tight, his voice urgent. "They know." Meredith stiffened. "Who?" "Axiom, Keller's pushing for your capture the moment this ends. He doesn't care about Stone anymore. The investors only want you." Rebecca bristled. "Then we get her out after the round." Wells shook his head. "You won't make it. The only way is to end this here, publicly, so decisively that Prometheus loses all credibility." Meredith's voice dropped. "You're asking me to burn myself alive." "I'm asking you to finish what you started," Wells said, his eyes hard. "Mercury built Prometheus. Only Mercury can kill it." The words hit like a bullet. She wanted to refuse, to walk away, to leave the ghosts in the dirt. But Rebecca's hand brushed hers firm, silent, trusting. And Meredith knew there was no walking away, not anymore. The final round was announced with theatrical gravity. Long-range elimination, 2 shooters, 1 target. distances climbing past 2,000 meters, creeping toward the edge of the possible. The crowd hushed. Stone stepped forward first, confidence forced across his face. His rifle gleamed, Axiom's tech humming faintly. His spotter whispered inputs, eyes never leaving the device in his hand. At 2,200 meters, Stone hit. At 2,600, hit. At 3,000, hit. The crowd roared, Stone's legend growing again with every pull. But Meredith saw it. The rhythm, the consistency, too clean, too mechanical, the algorithm whispering in his ear. And she knew this wasn't Stone shooting anymore. This was Prometheus. Rebecca leaned close. 3,600, your turn. Meredith settled in. The target shimmered at the edge of sight. Wind curled unpredictably, heat mirages bending lines. Rebecca's voice came low, steady. Wind 9 knots, variable. Cross breeze shift at 2,000. Adjust 0.4 right, elevation 28.1. Meredith let the numbers sink into her bones. Felt them, not as data but as instinct. She fired. The plate rang. The crowd gasped. Rebecca's whisper was fierce. Yes. Stone stepped up again. 3,800 meters. His spotter fed him corrections. He fired, hit. Applause thundered. Meredith's turn, same distance. The wind twisted viciously, shifting midline. Rebecca adjusted. Meredith fired. The plate jerked, spinning. Another hit. The crowd exploded. The scoreboard lit, tied. Only one target remained. 4,000 meters. The impossible. Stone went first. His hands tightened on the rifle. His jaw set. His spotter murmured numbers, the algorithm feeding lines no human could match. Stone fired. The crowd held its breath. 2 seconds, 3. The target rang. Direct hit. The stadium erupted. Soldiers cheered, generals smiled, journalists shouted. Axiom's men exchanged sharp nods. Prometheus had proven itself. Stone rose slowly, triumph burning in his eyes. He turned toward her, expression sharp, almost mocking. Your move. Meredith lowered herself into position. The rifle felt heavier than ever, the weight of ghosts pressing into her shoulder. Rebecca's voice came soft, steady. Wind shifting, mirage unstable, cross breeze doubling past 2,200, adjust 0.5 left, elevation 28.7. Meredith exhaled, numbers aligned in her bones. Michael's voice echoed faintly in memory, trust the math, trust yourself. She squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked. Silence stretched. 2 seconds, 3, 4. The target spun. Direct hit. The crowd went insane. Flags waved, cadets screamed, generals stared in disbelief. 2 shooters, 2 impossible shots. History rewritten twice in a single breath. But Meredith stayed prone, cheek against the rifle, her breathing calm, because she knew what came next. This wasn't the end. It was the trigger. Down at the command post, Keller turned sharply to his aides. Move now, bring her in alive. Contractors surged, already cutting through the crowd. And above the noise, Wells's voice came through Meredith's earpiece. They're coming for you. You've got one window, use it. Meredith rose slowly, slinging the rifle, eyes scanning. Rebecca at her side, tense. Stone watched from across the range, expression unreadable, triumph still on his lips, but something else in his eyes, conflict, doubt. And as Axiom's men closed in, the question burned like fire. Which way would Marcus Stone turn? Toward them? Or against them? Why wasn't anyone stopping them? The crowd cheered, generals shook hands, cameras flashed, but no one noticed the shift. Axiom's men, dressed like contractors, moved through the sea of uniforms with precision. Their path wasn't toward Stone. It was toward her. Meredith felt Rebecca stiffen beside her. They're coming. Yes, Meredith murmured, voice calm though her pulse quickened. Stay close, don't panic. Wells's voice crackled in her ear. "Extraction team's 10 minutes out. You don't have 10 minutes. Move now." But there was nowhere to move. The stage was a cage, the crowd walls of noise and bodies. Running would ignite chaos. Fighting would expose everything. And then Stone stepped forward. "Professor Caldwell," he called, his voice carrying across the range, commanding attention. "Stay right where you are." The crowd hushed, cameras swung, every eye turned. For a heartbeat, it looked like he was with them. Axiom's men paused, waiting for his signal. Meredith met his gaze, calm, unflinching, silent. And in that silence, Stone's mask cracked. He turned to Keller, standing smug at the command post. "Call them off." Keller's smile vanished. "Excuse me." Stone's voice sharpened. This was supposed to be a competition, not an abduction. Keller's tone was smooth, venom under silk. "Colonel, your contract doesn't grant you the luxury of principle. Do your job, deliver her." Stone hesitated, a soldier's pride against a mercenary's leash. For years he'd wanted to be the best, the name in history. But when Mercury had matched him, when she had beaten him, something shifted. He wasn't fighting a professor. He was fighting a machine in a suit. And he realized he'd rather lose to her than win for them. "Stand down," Stone barked to the contractors. "That's an order." The contractors froze, confused. Keller's face twisted. "You're finished, Colonel. Prometheus doesn't need your loyalty. It doesn't even need you." Stone's hand moved to his rifle. "Maybe not, but it still needs someone to pull the trigger." The air cracked. One of the contractors dropped. Chaos exploded. Gunfire ripped through the stands, screams rising as soldiers dragged civilians to cover. Meredith shoved Rebecca down, rolling behind the platform. Bullets sparked off steel, shouts echoing. Stone fired again, precise, covering the crowd instead of Axiom. His men hesitated, but then turned. Loyalty split, some firing at the contractors, others at him. Meredith chambered around, scanning. Rebecca beside her called positions like a spotter born. 3 at the left flank moving fast, 1 behind the bleachers. The rifle thundered, 1 target down, another. The third fell as Stone's shot cut clean through. Their eyes met across the chaos. Not allies, not enemies, something in between. "Survivors." Keller ducked behind the command post, fury etched across his face. Into his radio he hissed, "Initiate fallback. Bring the data. Leave the assets." Meredith's heart jolted. Data. She scanned the field. One of the contractors carried a hardened case slipping through the confusion. Rebecca spotted it too. "Professor, the case." "Prometheus," Meredith breathed. If that case left the field, the algorithm lived. She rose into fire, sprinting low, bullets snapping past. Rebecca followed, covering, her sidearm barking sharp rhythm. They reached the fleeing contractor just as he mounted the ridge. Meredith fired. His leg buckled, the case tumbling. Rebecca lunged, grabbing it before he could crawl back. She shoved it into Meredith's hands. "Go." Meredith snapped the locks, the case opening to reveal a tablet glowing with streams of code. Prometheus. Lines she recognized. Equations she had once written in the dark, now twisted into something monstrous. Her stomach turned. This was her ghost, her sin. Rebecca's voice broke through the roar. "What do we do?" Meredith stared at the screen, at the past she could no longer bury. And then she slammed the rifle stock down, shattering it into shards. Circuits cracked, the light fading. "No machine," she whispered, "will decide life and death." The fragments fell into the dirt. Prometheus was gone. Gunfire thinned. Contractors fell back, dragging their wounded. Soldiers secured the field, sirens wailing. Keller was gone, vanished into the smoke. Meredith lowered her rifle, chest heaving. Rebecca stood beside her, pale but steady, her hands still trembling from adrenaline. Stone approached slowly, his weapon lowered. His face was hard, unreadable. "You could have kept it," he said. "You could have owned it, but you destroyed it." Meredith met his eyes. "It was never meant to exist."